Welcome everyone. I'm super excited to have continuous conversation with my dear friend Diana Veskyte Landborg around something very important to me. And before I even get into all the explanation, all this, I just wanted to start saying that this is around exploring motherly connection. And why are we talking about motherly connection? First and foremost, I want to address how important our connection to our mothers are. And mothers can be in any sort of way. Some maybe were raised by aunts, uncles, fathers, whatever their major connection was first when they were born, that's the connection that is their motherly connection. And so obviously that can vary for many people. For me, it was my mother. For you, Diana?
My mother as
Also,
well.
yeah. So obviously we're going to talk from that perspective. And I want to also acknowledge that when we talk about these themes and there's gender involved, that we obviously are talking from our personal experience. So just as we said, we both are experiencing from a motherly experience, from a female experience. So we would love to invite you to any other experiences that you are having that we would learn from. And the other aspect why I wanted to touch on this is because in multiple different conversations that I had recently, every time something about mothers has come up, either the disconnect to their mothers or the extreme deep connections that I had, or some other experiences in connection to comparison and how we were looking up to our mothers and how they impacted us in our lives. I just had my mom here for 3 weeks, and obviously that also had a big impact on how I view my relationship with my mom, which was very pleasant. So there is nothing to report, but just huge awarenesses and noticings that I would love to share with you today. So my name is Raditya Lazari, and I welcome you to our conversation today with Diana and myself. So Diana, yes, we are here today to talk about these motherly connections. And obviously there's a lot we want to cover today and on other conversations. And so what comes up for you when I first shared with you about this topic, and also obviously having a little bit of an introduction to you about all my thoughts around this. So just, yeah, I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, and hello everyone. I'm grateful to be here again. It's always fun to talk with you, Dorothea, and about these important topics. And what comes to me is, I mean, the main caregiver and other people's situation for us, our mothers have been, tremendous in our lives. And I mean, for me, my connection with my mom, when you were talking about your mother that spent 3 weeks with you and you had this wonderful experience, that's the same I feel with my mother now. It's not been always totally like that, so that's what comes up with me, that for me, that it's this connection, it's ever evolving, like our life. It's like our life is always changing and evolving, and we are growing all the time. So is the connection with the mother. But what I seen during my years when I was Mind Valley ambassador, for example, for conscious parenting, there were a lot of talk about knowing yourself and also relationship with your kids, but also a relationship with your parents. And what came up for many people, usually that led to a lot of suffering for many, was especially the relationship with the main caregiver, in many cases, especially their mother, and how it affected their whole life and how they saw the life, what they felt, and also how they themselves then mothered their own children. And it was, everything was so connected. So that's what comes out of me, and that importance of, as you said, you were aware of how you and your mother spend time. That's awareness that comes with experiences in life, which is so important. And I'm just so grateful that I have my mom still alive, and also that we have this beautiful connection now. So I don't know, just go ahead, Raditya, and share what's on your mind. And I know you have some thoughts, so let's dive into it.
Oh, well, I definitely always have some thoughts here, right? Yeah, and I think I just want to connect to what you just said. Like, we both have lost our fathers more recently. And obviously, that has, in my eyes, emphasized that relationship. And I think it also showcased to me, at least for me, I had a very close relationship with my mom and a different kind of relationship with my dad. And it was kind of interesting to see how that loss has impacted my focus to cherish the people in my life. And obviously, like you just said, like, yeah, we're both fortunate at this moment that we had that we still have our moms in our lives to really explore and cherish these moments and figure more information out on like what is really this relationship here to do, right? And what it really means for us, because I know that when this relationship changes due to a loss, that everything will be in the past, right? So that means now I want to really take in all these moments and just make sure I'm giving my everything to these experiences. So I really think that that is something that struck me as you shared this, because that's something I know that is going to be such a missing piece. And so for now, I really want to cherish it as much as I can.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Me too. Yeah, I think that's the loss of our fathers, you know, I can't still talk about it without being sad, you know, or just, you know, my tears are running all the time. So don't be afraid, guys. I'm just a sensitive person, and I'm just how I am. But I mean, you said you had this close relationship with your mom and your dad, you had a different one. I had very close relationships with both of them, but in different ways. And my mom was the one who was working a lot when we were kids. Actually, I played a lot with my dad, and we played and had a lot of fun things, while my mom was the person who taught us things and said, you should do this, or should do that, or you shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that. And some of the things were really good, and some of the things, when I grew up and then I moved away to Sweden, and then was young adult, and then these things actually irritated me, and I was angry on her, how she behaved and what she said, and how it affected my life when I was starting to be aware of, you know, cause and effect of what people and parents do, and how we later on in life act and react. So there was a time, like early 20s, then I actually got this grudge against mom, and actually even before that I didn't had a grudge against her. It's more that when I was teenager, I was living in Sweden, so my father came to visit me more. So I was close with my mom, but I wasn't as close. And then when my father came to visit me more often, because he was working there sometimes, I became so much closer with him. So we talked, and it was just a beautiful connection. And that's why I think it's so hard for me, you know, just knowing that he's not there anymore, and that love we shared, and just makes me appreciate my mom so much more. And then also, but then I got my kids, and then I started to realize that being a parent is really hard. And some things I got even more annoyed at my parents, and some things I became actually grateful for and more understanding towards what they were doing, things that we were doing. And you know, just like now I'm just telling my story quickly, and then you just can dive in and whatever you want. And then I burned out, and then I felt really sad for myself and pity myself, and then I blame my parents and stuff like that, until I healed. I realized, oh my God, it's not their fault. They were doing the best they can at the time and knowledge they had, and I had so much love, so much care, so much good things. There were small tiny things that my little child's brain, you know, just, I don't know, fought in some way. And then I started to find them as, you know, of course affected me, but actually I'm an adult, and now I have to choose how I behave, and I can't blame my parents for it anymore, you know. And this grounding place that I found in myself, and the gratitude towards my parents, and especially now when my dad is not there, there's, you know, this, or my mom, and all the small things that I had been, you know, so irritated at her about, everything is gone. And it's like, now last autumn, me and my mom, we went for a beautiful trip to Austria. And I mean, I was a bit worried that we would, you know, fight with things, or she would say something and that trigger me, but nothing like that happened. We had such an open-hearted, so beautiful connection. We had such a lovely trip, and we had such a good time, and we just flowed with one another. And I realized how important this relationship is for me, just having him there, sitting there, and I know always that I can call her. I know always that she will listen and not judge me anymore that often. It happens sometimes still, and especially when I was younger, but she's changed and I've changed and our relationship just evolved. But I just, especially after losing dad, I realized how lucky I have been and haven't realized that so much. And I wish I was cherished my dad even more when he was alive. But it really makes me appreciate life and appreciate parents and appreciate, the love we have, and cherish every moment, really.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you so much for sharing this vivid image of your experience with your parents and what changed. And I think that's exactly why I want to have these conversations, is for people to, if they still have their parents in their lives, be it both or one of them, to really cherish the experiences and to put that small stuff aside, because at the end of the day, we're just here to do our best. And I think that's what really resonated for me too when I started. And again, it also happened for me when I became a mom. And I remember my mom making this comment. It's like, yeah, I was just so glad that you had a child, so that what it's like. So I think it was really hard to be a parent. And I think as children, we just are children. We're just oblivious to what's going on in the world. We're so entangled in our own stuff. And I think that's what really opened my eyes. And also, that's one of the reasons we're having these conversations as well, is to really recognize the piece of growing up, that not only is it me as a individual to grow up and have someone to look up to, if you have a child or even a pet, or someone you're caring for, even maybe at work, that someone that is, you're teaching someone to do something, like even that relationship, there is something to be curious about when things don't work out, when something is challenging, because that's when we grow the most. And I think that really came up for me as I was prepping and getting to this theme of motherly connection. Is like, what is it that we need more of? What is something we can cultivate on our own, by ourselves, where we just look into the outside world and reflect on what's happening there, right? Like, we were talking briefly, like what's going on in Palestine, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in all these other places, even in Africa, in all these different places. I think there's, Yemen, which is not Africa, but then, Congo and Sudan and all these other places where there is all these issues happening, where children and families are being separated and torn apart. And I think, to me, I didn't know where to touch on this, but I think what my work and our, connection really has emphasized on is about the human experience. And if we are only focusing on what is happening without understanding what is really happening on the grounds of it, right? Like, I was thinking about this example of a tree. I imagine myself being a tree, and a tree that has roots, something that needs stabilization, that has to uh, weather through storms, and what it has to endure and what it has to grow into for it to be that strong, that tall, that big, and aged for years. And I was just imagining what is happening, what people are going through, and what it will mean for our future when the ground is being torn away, taken away from us. And at the end of the day, what we want to focus here is really, one, awareness, right? That's what we just started off. The awareness of, like, what do our parents mean to us? Be it good or bad, or positive and negative, is what I prefer to mention, because it has less of a judgment. Because positive and negative, just like in life, in battery and energy and anything that functions with power, there is a positive and negative energy that we need. And so, what are those things? Because at the end of the day, there are certain things we need to strengthen. Those things that are positive, we want to get a better this, a better connection in that. And then the things that are negative, there are maybe the weak ties, to not actually remove them completely, but have something on the positive side that can exchange it in a way that strengthens us as a whole. Because at the end of the day, I feel like we cannot only look at the things that were working well. We also need to look at the things that are not working well. And today's generation is doing this very, very well to point out the things that are not going well. And but not to lose hope that there is also a lot of good things, right? So maybe it's not just about shoving all the negative things under the rug and just present the good things. It's like, well, look at this. It's all very great over here, right? Like we want to figure out a way that our foundation of nourishing, and that's where I take that motherly connection back in, because that's what it is, right? Mothers, be it in any gender form, whatever shape they're taking on, that person that is there that takes care of us in a way that is just unconditional, that doesn't ask us if I have time or not, even though I gotta admit that sometimes as a mother, I do find myself like, oh no, I can't do this right now. I have to remind myself I make time for this. I'll put my whatever work I have to do aside. I take a moment and just address, right? And yes, you gotta wait sometimes. But again, bringing back that there is a pull and push on both sides. It's not just me catering to my child or just catering to my parents to make them happy, to also get a little bit into a conflict, to push and pull a little bit and bring our own self into it. And so, as we touched on this, I mean, many things you mentioned, I really loved in relationship to how our experiences are different with our moms and our dads, and how each one of them had brought something that was maybe a little more challenging and yet, supportive later on in life as we're moving into our own experiences as parents, and exploring it in a way that is eye-opening, warm-hearting, compassionate, and love sharing that I want to get into, that includes both sides. Any thoughts so far?
Well, you said so many wise and different things. No, but I'm just thinking, partly just touch a little bit about what's happening in the world, right? And it's so many horrible things happening in the world, and it's horrible, and my heart is bleeding when I see children dying, and families splitting up, and I mean, especially for me now, I'm a hypnotherapist and studying stress therapist, and I mean, I've studied so much about the brain and how it's all connected, and some people, they manage through their life better, even though they had these all experiences and still managed to live. But for many, it leaves really, really deep wounds, and it affects our life to the core. And that's so sad to see, because there are other ways to live life. And this power struggle, this politics and everything that makes innocent people die is horrible. But as I agree with you, it's not the political arena, this one. What we are talking about is more being connection to other people, being aware of life, and not being toxically positive, because it's toxic, but being aware of positive and negative sides of all the relationships and all the things that happen in life, and also be grateful, because I think when we watch news now and so on, it's so easy to get so depressed. Before, like, Ukraine war started, I was drawn to that because it reminded me of my upbringing, and when Lithuania was on the verge of becoming free from the Soviet Union, where I grew up, and all these fears and everything, and I was just watching the news nonstop in 3 different languages or 4 languages, and it made me feel, and since I know the awareness, I was so tense. I was feeling so bad, and I was feeling easily agitated and angry towards my closest people who I lived around every day. So instead of, it was important for me to realize that, and know that somehow I just realized that my work wasn't be angry at the world. It was, of course, to make awareness and maybe support in other ways, just like sending food or whatever I could afford, but also actually go out in schools and talk with kids about the war and how it affects, but also about their feelings about it and how to handle these strong, because not every child has maybe some adults that are listening, or maybe we're just sitting and listening on TV and see the news, but no one is talking about that. And it's just so important for kids to have this container and wiser, older, people who can hold space, but also say that they are safe. They are safe now. And as you said, there is hope. It still is. But important part to see that they need to have adults. It doesn't matter if it's mom, whatever. Good, stable adults that are there for them in times like that are scary. And show that it's not only that. There are so much beauty around, and there's so much things that we can do to make this world a better place. And we can't find everywhere, everyone, everything, but what we can do is do something maybe in our societies, and with our kids. Like for me, I had to stop watching the news because my nervous system after 2 burnouts is so easily triggered. So even though I know so much good techniques and things, I had to stop because I was feeling so bad physically and mentally, because I was not being a good role model for my kids and not being a good wife truly. So for me, it was to be stable and to be aware of what I was doing and how I was behaving, and also a bit aware of my environment, and trying to be more stable, more loving, more peaceful person, but also holding space for the kids and listening to them and listening to their fears, and just showing them that they are safe. And because I think many people are fearing really bad, because many people don't feel safe today.
Yeah. And I'm glad you ended around safety, because at the end of the day, that really is our innate requirement to feel safe, right? Like as a human, no matter what it is, it could be just walking out of the street and feel safe about our surroundings. And I think these days, with the news that are happening, like it or not, it creates a certain discomfort and fear based environment. And who knows, maybe that's their goal, right? Like maybe we're creating something like this because we know that when we are in fear, the way we react and respond to certain things aren't as clear minded. It comes out of this part of our brain that is trying to protect us, which is so logic. And therefore, we need, as an individual, to figure something out that brings us back to safety, brings us back to protection, brings us back to a place where we can make conscious decisions on what is a necessity to take action that are really helpful and doesn't do the same thing other people are already doing. And I think that's where this conversation really, like, I was seeking, like, what was this that I'm wanting to get out? And that's exactly what it is bringing enough awareness to how our sensations and feelings are, emotions internally, so that we're not reacting in a way of blaming and reacting and trying to resist to certain things, but figuring out a way to invite those experiences we're having internally. And instead of going into this flight, freeze, faint, whatever other names they can now say, mode, is to become more present and like, all right, this is what's going on. What are some actions, like you beautifully said, like what are some actions I can do that are accessible to me that will help me, my environment, my community, and my well-being? And I think that really is what these conversations are here to do, to understand, like, we all have things going on internally. And that's obviously why breathing and meditation has become such a big, you know, mega trend, as we want to say, because it is helping us to be more aware what's happening inside. But meditation alone is not the solution. You just meditating all the time is not going to bring that awareness. What we need to create is communities where we hold space for one another, where everyone can share what's on their mind and on their in their hearts without being pointed in a direction that they have to change, but that they by themselves, that we as an individual make our own changes because we know it's necessary. But it only happens when we look around, our eyes are wide open, our hearts are wide open, and we can actually receive what's happening. And that's not in the news, that's not in what they're sharing with us on social media, because that is just like bombarding us with information that we as an individual don't even know how to comprehend and what to do with it. So the environments that we created this far is to really invite people for their own experiences. And like we said at the beginning around gender, like we talk about our personal experiences, especially for me as a female woman who is in a, I forgot the words, but in a male woman relationship. And
Heterosexual.
There you go. Thank you. Because there was another term that they were using. So yes, and thank you. And so all these like there is so much more complexity happening. So that's why it is even harder for us to even know where to take action. So my go-to is always, okay, I'll take action here, right here, with me, by myself, with a group of people that probably are able to access this. Doesn't mean that they know, but they are allowing me to share. And so these are the spaces that I created this far. I'm sure this is why I love speaking with you about these topics. And obviously, if there are people that are wanting to have these spaces, then we both will be willing to host these and hold these. You just have to let us know, right? And I think that's what I'm seeking and wanting to create is more spaces where people feel safe to share their vulnerability, not being blamed or made guilty of their experiences.
That's so beautiful. And you know, when you were talking about that just right now, that's the thing I feel with my mom now. I mean, with you too, but like with my mom, it's like some special bond there, because it's like I've been through tough 3 years, I might say, and what I felt really that connected me and my mom even closer now, it was that space, you know. Like before she was younger, she was more hot-tempered and she could just blur out things and feelings and she could say hurtful things. And during our, as you said, positive and negative, and during our journey together, when I was irritated at her, I was like, you know, I was also blurring out the things that hurt her, but I also said things, asked her not to do things that really were hurtful, and actually she's been listening to it. And I think that's why, I mean, I put my boundaries, and it's been so beautiful, because that's, she was starting to listen, and she was starting to realize what she was saying and doing and how it affected me. And the least thing most of us parents want to do is to hurt our kids. We are not doing it on purpose. So she was really actually, she changed, she shifted, and that's why I think it's our relationship is so beautiful. But also that she's holding that space for me, where I can feel vulnerable, and you too, and I can talk about everything without being judged. And it's such a relief and such a freedom to have people like that around you who actually listen, and understand and just hold space. And I feel it's really important for us all. And I just love still mention when you were talking misconnections, and I think too few people actually, I think, have these spaces. And as you said, we are all both open to do that for people. And you were talking about this tree. I want to go back to that because it was so beautiful, because I see in images, and it's just like the roots, they are so important. And if you say, if the roots are not strong, as you said, and if it's not nourished, it's so easy to fall and back and fall and back. And it was like that for me, you know, when I was moved from home when I was 15, and I got this influences from the family, Swedish family I lived at, but didn't align with the family when I lived in Lithuania, and when I started doubting myself, and when I married to a Swedish guy who had a totally different culture, and then I wasn't sure in myself, and career wasn't going that, and I was not in a good space, and so I totally lost myself. I felt I fought. I couldn't go to my parents, even though they always been there, and I always felt loved, and I always felt wanted there. But in my mind, I was fighting, and I didn't feel that I could talk to them totally openly, because I had these small things I was irritated at them, and I thought they wouldn't understand. And I mean, my husband and me, we are from different cultures, and man and woman and stuff like that. And sometimes it felt that we are different generations also, because I grew up in Soviet. It was totally different. So it's not been easy. And at that point, if wind would blow, I fell down. That's why I think I more easily burned out, because I wasn't strong in myself. Even though I got really beautiful roots when I was a kid, when I moved away when I was 15, just as an adventure, I didn't realize that those roots lifted quite a lot. And also when I burned out, they lifted even more, because I was so attached to what I was doing, so attached to my self-esteem and self-love. So when I wasn't able to do anything, I started hating myself and doubting myself. So when I found this ground again, and I found ground in myself and strengthened those roots of my own now, and I can stand much taller and much stronger. And now I have my mom also, and my husband and other people supporting me, that actually I realized that I have. But before that, when I wasn't feeling good, I didn't, my roots were not nourished enough, so they became, not so strong. And then my smallest thing could blow me over. But now I feel I don't know why I'm talking about that. I just thought about the tree that you mentioned, and I think that's where connection with our mothers, because that's what we were talking about, or close caregivers, or other people that we are really close, are so important. So we feel, strong and grounded and cared for. And when we are that, I think we affecting people around us in a better way, and we're helping build a better world, I hope.
Well, I do hope so too. And, like so many, again, you two mentioning so many great things, because so there is this one thing you talked about, the relationship with your mom and the establishment of that, right? That nourishing. And then you mentioned the tree, the nourishing. And obviously, I started the conversation off with like, we want to build a foundation, and that motherly connection means that nourishments that we're getting. And so nutrients, right? Like it's even food or whatever. You could look even further away, but to bring it back to where you were, that all takes time, right? So especially when you talked about this literal movement of space, right? Like you were moved from one place to another. That's why they say like we don't move old trees, like once you like when you live somewhere and you're older, you shouldn't move them to another place, because it all brings up stuff to like, oh my god, I gotta restart, right? And this secures us. And so I don't know if that's a term, but I'll just make it, you know what I mean, the opposite of secure. And what I'm seeing also in what you're sharing and what we want to establish in these conversations is to understand that nourishment, if especially during these transitions of child to adulthood, right? There is this long time frame between being a teenager, adolescent, young adult, becoming an adult. Like that's a long time of a lot of transitions, lots going on educationally, maybe even workforce wise, relationship wise, so many missing or moving pieces. And just like you described, and obviously your experience is even a little bit more severe in a way because it was a physical move as well. Maybe you even have that too. It doesn't help that there's that nourishment is going missing, or to the extent that it was. And we as individuals have to find it somehow. And it's very difficult in this uneasy world that we're in, when I think about the teenagers and young adults these days, what is really difficult is because there's even that heavy weight of what's going on in the world, plus the things that they have to go through. No wonder it's like a little bit uneasy all over the world. And wherever we touch on something, people get very sensitive about saying what we're saying and how we phrase it, because it's very unstable and it's very difficult for anyone going through this time frame of life in a very uneasy environment. So imagine you're going through an uneasy time with your family, how that, plus everything else, how that impacts our livelihood. And that's where I want to bring it back, is to enrich those roots, because we all have the roots. They might just be a little shorter, maybe less nourished, and all these things, but we can get back to this. It just takes, one, willingness to do it, and two, the time to invest into this nourishment, and stopping, like you talked about boundaries, stopping certain influences and inputs and impacts from the outer world that can destabilize it. And so, what else can we do to really establish these re-nourishments, right? Like, we're going to get to an end here, so I would like to hear from you some of the ways that we can bring it back to nourishment, bring it back to ease, bring it back to stabilization, and also some last thoughts that you're having that you wanted to share.
That's beautiful. Thank you. No, I mean, bringing back, you know me, bringing back your awareness to your breath. For me, it's a number one thing. Just bringing back the awareness to here and now, because our minds, they're running and they're telling stories, and they're telling past stories and future stories, and some of them are true. Most of them are made up, and all the information around it, it stresses our minds so much. And just bringing our awareness back to here and now, to what we have around us here and now in this moment, I think it's one of the main things that can ground us and nourish us for a moment. You know, just taking a step back from our busy minds and problem solving things that are very good to have in special occasions, but for our own well-being and this groundedness, I think it's very important to step back and just, you know, observe our body, observe where we are tense, observe and be grateful for the surroundings if we have that possibility, you know. So it's like observe our kids when they are playing or talking, and just being aware, and take these things away for a moment, mobile phones and so on, because what I see, it's not only that, you know, there's a lot of bad things happening in the world, and many young people are feeling really bad, and many are very depressed, especially young girls. Social media is not always the good thing either, you know. It's sometimes it's good to make less of it, you know, just make pauses from that, because it also runs our mind, and we start to compare ourselves, which is natural, and then there's so much that is not true, and even so much that's AI generated nowadays, and it's and it also adds to the stressors that young people go through, or even people in our age, of course, as well. There are a lot of studies showing that social media, for example, like Facebook or whatever, that people who are watching many hours of social media, they actually feel less good mentally. But there is social media like we and you are doing, that we're sharing information or listening to something, educating. That's one thing. But I mean, so for me, yeah, the connect to people that you love and care about, and bring your awareness to here and now, and try to be grateful for things you have, because we often forget that, because we always want more and more and more, which is also natural in human behavior. But just by doing all those things, I think we get more grounded again, and we get this pause from this crazy busy world we live in, and hopefully can make better, wiser decisions.
Awesome. I love everything you just said. What I want to like emphasize on what you said, and that will be actually our conversation in the next time, is to really see the emphasis on in-person connection. Obviously, Diana and I have never met in person, so we can't really talk about in-person connection personally yet. All I can say is that referring to social media, referring to our smartphones that are our number one tools that can do so many things for us in our days, that obviously is like our number one connector to the outside world, to our memories of all sorts of things, that obviously it's not about neglecting it or putting it aside, but I want to touch on that in our next conversation, because that is also an extension of motherly connection. Because if that becomes our motherly connection, what does that mean for the future? So that's where we're going to go next time, because that really sparked something. Because we tend to focus on the things that are most present in our lives and bringing gratitude into it. We are grateful for those things, but I think we're not adding enough gratitude to the things that are actually showing up in real life here around me, that those trees, these plants around me, and really bringing this motherly earth, the mother earth, into the perspective, and to make these connections between technology and nature. And that's really what I'm sensing this conversation really has made me see, is that there is this piece of us as humans, that we are a human connection, this nature connection, this motherly connection, that I was really drawn to. And to bring it back to this, we need to address these other connections that we're having, these technological, technical connections, and how they are part of our lives. And I agree with you. We need to, and I mean, obviously, this is why we are connected, is like awareness is just really the number one thing we need to get better at noticing. Like, yes, I also spend time on my Instagrams and such. And sometimes I get caught into these reels, but after 10-15 minutes, I tell myself out loud, enough, out, do something else. Like, I have to tell myself. And I notice when I observe other people and their comments about it, is like, oh, I just can't stop, I'm there for an hour. I'm like, an hour? Like, that's a sense of a timely awareness, right? So it really boils down that this awareness I have and this gratitude I have for what's actually happening in the real world is missing. And that in our, talking about exploring motherly connection, is something that we're not really focusing on so much. So my last thoughts are just, I hope this conversation has sparked some awareness and understanding around your own ways of interacting with your motherly connection, with how you operate in this today world, how it affects you in this world, and maybe also brought some questions around what is nourishing me, what is bringing some grounding and some foundational strength and stability into my life. And so that's what I want to leave you with, is with this question for yourself, to explore it. And hopefully you'll join us again next week when we talk about these next steps on how to connect to the motherly connection in this world that we're living in. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you very much.